McNair gives it to George, running right up the middle. Touchdown! Titans! There are no flags on the field! It's a miracle!
Safety, now you're one-on-one with it.
Shows why he's the man! In trouble. Sack!
Ladies and gentlemen, Titan Nation, how you guys doing today? Today on the Mr. Titan Show, I have a guest, Emmy-winning sports reporter. We have Kayla Anderson. How you doing today, ma'am?
I am doing great. Thanks for having me on the podcast. The background is looking sharp. Got a lot of two-tone blue in there.
Definitely. Again, gotta always represent, especially in Dallas, Texas, where I'm in the heart of Cowboy Nation. So it's disgusting, you know. This is the best blue ever there. So, but again, thank you so much for coming on, and I appreciate the time spent. I know you're a busy person and stuff like that. So again, it's always an honor to have you.
My pleasure. I'm excited to talk some Titans.
Oh, definitely. We're going to be talking about Titans, but I want to kind of focus my attention on you and your career. You know, we obviously love the Titans, this and that, but I would really would like to know just about how you started your career, and was this your passion from the get-go? What were your influences? What kind of drove you to where you're at today?
Yeah, well, my story is a very long story considering I've been in the business now for 15 years. So it's been a lot of twists and turns along the way. I am very transparent with the way that I've climbed the ladder. I compare it a lot to minor league baseball. It's been a really tough climb. There's been a lot of adversity that I've overcome. But when it all comes down to it, I wouldn't still be here unless I really had a passion for what I do. And that is reporting sports, telling stories, getting to know players and coaches, building relationships in the sports world. And because I've been in local news my whole career, I've been able to be in a lot of different places, and I've been able to cover a lot of different teams, which means a lot of players, a lot of coaches. And when you get to that point in your career where you've made it 15 years, the great part about it is you feel like you have those connections, and you feel like just naturally you know a lot about a lot of things because you've been a lot of places. And so my career started off, I knew what I wanted to do since I was in like 5th grade. I always wanted to tell stories and be able to not necessarily be on camera. That's not what it was about for me, but it was about connecting people with guys and gals that play these sports and, you know, these phenomenal athletes. Because growing up, I always wanted to be some like 3-sport athlete because I have this really competitive mindset. I danced, I played softball. Everything I do though, I've always been competitive, whether it be my grades or competing with my brother in just activities throughout growing up. I've always just wanted to be the best at what I do. And physically, I wasn't gifted enough to be some college athlete or some pro athlete, but I appreciated the mindset of an athlete. So I knew at a young age, I wanted to do something within sports. So I did a lot of stuff in high school to help me get to the level in college where I went to a broadcast journalism school at Washington State, the Edward R. Murrow School of Communication, one of the best in the country, got my degree in broadcast journalism, and just knew I was going to have to grind. I was going to have to get my foot in the door and then work really hard to get to where I wanted to get to. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, I started as an intern right out of Washington State at a little small station in Bend, Oregon. And I was doing sports and news, which any sports person will probably tell you they don't want to be doing news because that's just not our thing. But I didn't have a choice. If I wanted to get in the business, I had to do what was offered to me. And so I did that, and I did that for a few months, and then I got a full-time job being a sports broadcaster in Montgomery, Alabama. So I got to move to a whole different place that I've never been before and take on a whole different culture, especially when it comes to football. And that was a great learning experience. And then I went back to my hometown and I got a job offer there, signed a 3-year contract, got laid off after 6 months. And that was kind of the first time that I really was made aware that this business is tough, right? I mean, you don't have control over everything. And so I had to pick myself up. I mean, it was 5 months of not having a job. It was a bad time. It was 2008. The economy wasn't great. There were no jobs. I had to pick myself up, and I had to say, I'm going to have to go backwards a little and take a smaller, market job, a lot less pay in Missoula, Montana, but I'm getting back into sports, and that's what I did. So I went to Missoula, Montana, covered some great FCS football, covered some great basketball with the Montana Grizzlies at the time. And then I was a sports director there, so I kind of was able to groom myself a little more on air. And then I went to Tucson, Arizona. I was the weekend sports person there for 2 years. And then I got the opportunity to go to Columbus, where I was there for 3 years. Hi! And
sorry about that.
So cute. And I loved Columbus. I got to cover the 2014 National Championship with the Buckeyes. I covered the World Series with the Indians. It was one of the greatest experiences. Unfortunately, I got laid off there too in my 3rd year. And that's where it opened up here in Nashville. And I've been here ever since. I just celebrated my 4th year anniversary yesterday at News 2. So it's been a crazy journey. Thank you. But you know what? The moral of the story is you can sit there and feel sorry for yourself about what's happened and how your career's unfolded, or you can just know that it's in the long run going to benefit you going through adversity, going and learning all these different sports in different cities, and just knowing that it's all going to work out in the end. And that's how I've looked at it.
Wow. Especially, I think that's more is the mentality that you have. Because a lot of people, I mean, that's rough right there, especially, being laid off for that long. A lot of people will have a breakdown and stuff like that. So, I mean, your mental toughness, you got it. I'll give you that. And that's amazing. You've been to so many places and you covered so many sports. That's, I mean, like you said, the Cleveland Indians, like that's really cool. That's, again, not a lot of people can say that in their career they ever did that. So, I mean, hats off to you on that one. So that's really cool.
It was a lot of fun. I'll tell you that's the benefit of being in so many places, because the amount of things that I've covered that I look back and I'm like, wow, I actually got to do that. Mm-hmm. That's pretty phenomenal that not a lot of people can say they've covered so many big things. So that is like the benefit of it, is knowing that you have a list of cool events and things that you've covered over your career.
Now, was there any point in your career where it was like too overwhelming? Like, I mean, like you said, you covered every single sport. Like I know some people that covered just football, some people, but you covering everything, that's a lot of contact. Like you said, a lot of contacts, a lot of people, a lot of just, it just seems like it's just a lot on your plate. How do you do it?
Yeah, I'm a competitor, right? That's what it all goes back to just my natural mindset. I just have this ability to be able to juggle things, to be able to know how to pick things up quickly, and to understand sports. It's hard because if you didn't play a certain sport, you definitely have to have reps in terms of coverage. And the more and more I've covered football, and now I've covered, professional NFL football this is going to be my 5th season, I've learned so much more. But, I took the reps to get to this point, even starting from like the basics with high school and then building my way up through covering some big time college programs and now the Titans and the NFL. And I grew up with a brother who played hockey. I know hockey very well. It's one of my favorite sports. So that was also something where I knew the sport, but it wasn't until Columbus where I got to actually cover the league. And then I've been here for, 4 years and covering the Pred. So my knowledge of hockey has just built. And everywhere you go, you just kind of have to build on what you've done with each and every sport. For the first time though, I've covered a little bit more in terms of boxing because of Caleb Plant. And that's something where I've taken it upon myself. I've always really appreciated the sport, but I never got to really cover it until his fight here. And now I kind of know the sport more because I've covered it, right? And we have a guy right from Nashville that's about to go fight on one of the biggest stages, and it just is exciting to me that we get to cover something like that, even though it's a sport that I'm still kind of learning.
Well, it's like you almost like you grow with the sport, like you learn as you go. So that's something really, really neat too. You got what's the UFC fighter he fights out of Nashville too. What's his name? Chandler.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. And
Michael
it's that
Chandler, I think.
there's so many little stories that you're learning along the way, and there's so many that are coming out of this area. It's incredible.
Yeah, so those are always nice to especially those good underdog stories, or those people, those are the everyone loves that. Everyone loves an underdog story, So
Me too.
So one of the questions I actually had from one of my friends, she wanted to know just you said you had some ups and downs, obviously. Considering what has been right now your greatest accomplishment, especially with the thing about sports, it's supposedly it's male dominated, for a female to come in, and now there's other organizations, right, that are recognizing females, and look at the Titans, Amy Armstrong, and they're doing other leagues like that where they're acknowledging females, and how does it feel for yourself to be part of that group, and just to kind of clarify, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I take a lot of pride in where I'm at in terms of my career, because there's people who I looked up to who paved the way for me, and those are people like Robin Roberts and Laura Oakman, who actually lives in the Nashville area now, and even gals like Dawn Davenport, who she's not much older than I am, but I really always followed her work from afar, because I always found that Nashville to me was a fascinating market. And I tried to come here a couple times, just the timing hadn't worked out earlier in my career. So Dawn is someone who I always appreciated her work. And she's obviously multi-talented, does stuff on the radio, does sideline for ESPN. Just those are some of the women I looked up to. But now I'm at the point of my career where I realize I'm a mentor for a lot of young ladies. And I have young women and men reaching out to me on a weekly basis, just asking for advice. I have a few young women who I mentor on a daily basis. One that's now working in Knoxville, Tennessee, who was my intern in Columbus, Ohio. And now she's working in the sports industry. And I just always want to be that person who's transparent about this business and the ups and downs. I'm never going to sugarcoat anything, because that doesn't benefit you. What benefits you is being a supportive person, but also letting you know that there's going to be ups and downs. And sometimes you can't focus on everybody else and what they're doing and compare yourself, because that's one thing I've had to learn in this business is I've got to take care of what I'm doing and not worry about comparing it to somebody else who's maybe a little bit further along than I am. And so I think just being honest with these young women and making sure that you're setting an example and doing it the right way, that's what we need more of.
Definitely. And that's a hell of an answer. And again, I think that's the best thing. This is not to sugarcoat it, right? Not to kind of feed people just not lies, but just everything's gonna be all right. No, you got to let them know it's gonna be rough sometimes, and you just gotta. It's how bad you want it. That comes down to, you said, your drive, competitive, right? So
absolutely, no, 100%. And I know that some people, they get into this business and it's just not for them, and that's okay, right? And there's some people that they just can't, no matter what you do, you can't knock them down, and you got to respect those people too, because they're in it because they really love what they do. It's a different path for everyone. And I started to realize that a little bit further into my career. And that's when you start to really just like be comfortable with who you are.
Definitely. If there was one thing you could go back when you first started, your career, that you could like almost like a learning lesson that you could tell your past self, what would be one thing to be like, hey, Kayla, don't do this, or hey, remember this, or is there anything that kind of pops up in your mind that like almost like a learning lesson?
You know, I probably wouldn't change anything necessarily, because what you do early on, you learn from, and that's what makes you better in terms of this
Absolutely.
business. And I feel like I've always laid it all out there, no matter what the situation is. But I know early on in my career, I definitely was a little bit, I guess, too focused on the future and having to make moves at a certain age and having to be someplace at a certain age. And I think if I had advice for those younger women coming into the business, like, don't set a timetable for anything, because your career is going to play out how it's going to play out. And I keep hearing the words of like some of these players on the fringe, like Cam Batson the other day, saying you can only control what you can control,
Absolutely.
because there's so many other people out there going for the same jobs, and a lot of it is timing. So don't set a timetable for yourself. Like, I know I'm in my 30s now, and it's crazy to think that I've already reached that point, but I'm like, I've got years left. I don't need to set a timetable. I can still achieve my goals, and that only puts more pressure on yourself. So I'd probably say to my younger self, Kayla, you don't need to be setting a timetable and how many years you need to be in a certain place before you move on.
Just focus on you. That's it.
Yes.
Everything will eventually line up.
Yep.
It's the best. That's the best advice and the best way to go about things. That's why I go. I kind of don't stress about things too often and stuff like that, because again, there are bigger plans out for you. I mean, if you believe in God, if you don't, I mean, I
Yep.
think at the end of the day, if you're on the straight path, things will eventually line up and
Yep.
everything will hold up, like I said. But that's awesome. That's really cool. Now, what's your favorite sport to cover? Is there I think maybe baseball. Is it
Yeah.
baseball?
Yeah, baseball and hockey. Those are my passions. And baseball, clearly, for the fact that I played softball.
Okay.
There's just something about the game that I really appreciate. My mind likes to work, right? And baseball is a sport where it's not always just like this. It's not going 24/7. And I know that most people like that kind of stuff. I actually like to sit back and see things unfold and break down, scenarios. And that's why I love the game, I think, so much, because I played it. I've literally covered almost every level of baseball in my career,
Wow.
and a lot of teams. And so I just like being around the clubhouse and hearing the stories and telling the stories and the underdog stories that come along. Like, even a guy like Tony Kemp, who is from this area, he's one of those guys, like, yeah, he went to Vanderbilt, but like, he's a guy that's really had to work hard to stay in the majors. And now he's doing an amazing job with the Oakland A's right now. And I love those stories, and I love those people, because they just understand and they get it. And that's why I love the game of baseball. And then hockey, I grew up with it. I had mentioned that to you. I grew up with the WHL team and the Spokane Chiefs. It's a great sport. It's a hard sport. These guys are tough, but it's such a fun sport to actually watch in person. I always tell people, you have to go and watch a game in person to really understand and see how fun the game is. So those are my it is so fast paced. Yeah. But those are my two favorite sports to cover. But again, I mean, football's always going to be fun. And to cover the Titans the last 4 seasons has been nothing but a blessing. I have absolutely enjoyed every single player that I have covered in that locker room. I'm not kidding you. it's just something about the organization. Like they have their stuff together, and the culture thing is real. Like they only are bringing in people there that fit their culture.
Yep.
And you can see that if you've actually covered the team.
Definitely. And I remember when I had TD on, which was good. It was interesting what he was telling me, because I was always asking, I'm like, hey, so covering the Titans, who was there anyone that you like to talk to the interview, or some guys that you're like, I wouldn't talk to them after the game, they just lost.
Sure.
And he was telling me that there were certain individuals that he would go to, like we had Cameron Wake a couple of years ago, and he's like, he would talk to him about business. He's like, Cameron. And I was like, so is there anyone that in the Titans locker room that you would go to, or anyone that you would, maybe get, not financial help, or like maybe some like tips on anything?
My relationship with players is, I'm a person who, straightforward, I'm a female, right? And I don't care what anyone says, it's different. We're treated different in terms of how, we're expected to cover things. Like we go into the locker room, a lot of these male reporters can go and get numbers from players, and they can build that kind of relationship. I have never, ever been I've always been able to build relationship with players, but not to the level where I'm trying to get inside information. Or for me, it's about really them knowing that I'm doing this because I love the game and I love covering sports. And my mission is to connect the players with the fans and the people who follow the team. That's my mission. Mm-hmm. And it's not always positive information. If we have to report something that's, not the greatest news, that's my job to do that too. But I always want to, if I can, paint these players in a positive light, because for the most part, I've covered players that have brought positive things to the organization. So, a guy like Kevin Byard has always been a guy that I feel comfortable going to, no matter if it's a loss or a win, or I'm in the locker room during game week and I have a question about anything. I can ask him and I don't feel like I'm getting pushed back or whatever. But then you can go out in the community and also cover the great things that he has done in Middle Tennessee. There's a lot of great things that Kevin Byard has done. And that's the same thing when Logan Ryan was here. I will say nothing positive, but positive things about Logan Ryan. He was an asset in that locker room. I'm sad that he's with the Giants now, selfishly, because I think he brought so much leadership to this team.
Yep.
And he was a guy that he would tell it how it is. And that I appreciate that too, because sometimes you just want to hear honesty, right?
Yeah.
But he's another one that did a lot in the community. The list goes on and on. The guys in the locker room, they can get testy at times if they lose a game or whatever. But for the most part, you can go up to them, and if you want to have a conversation about, this or that, let's see. Jayon Brown is one. He's a Pac-12 guy, right? I'm a Pac-12 girl. I would go in there after weekends and I would bug him and Adoree Jackson because they're both Pac-12 guys, and we'd give each other crap for what team won and lost. And that's the fun stuff. Like, you can see the human side of them too. And I think that's important as a reporter, to be able to connect on that level as well.
Yeah, definitely. And also to bring to kind of let people realize that, like, hey, these guys are humans as well. Like, a lot of people, I think that's where people gravitate more to,
Me too.
Like you're like, oh, well, Jayon Brown, well, he likes that. Well, so do I. Like, they're that little connection.
I'll tell one more story.
Go ahead.
So I do that, and you guys can look forward to this year we do a Titan show, TN Nation, every Saturday it airs. And I have always done the 2-minute drill. So I usually talk with one player a week, and I get to show them on a different level to the fans. And so we're doing it again this year. And I think it was a couple years ago when we still had locker room access, I did one with Jayon, and I did one with Jonnu Smith. And one of my favorite things is when I do research, sometimes I can figure out like their favorite like food or snack. Mm-hmm. So for both Jayon and Jonnu, I brought them at the end of the interview. I pulled out like their favorite, thing. And for Jonnu, his reaction was priceless. I brought out, I made him, like, I asked him what it was, and he said Swedish fish. And I plucked it out of my pocket, and the whole locker room was just laughing because he was so excited that I had some Swedish fish to start the day. So it's just fun stuff like that where it's okay to just be yourself sometimes, right?
Definitely.
And we're all the same people when it comes down to it.
Yeah, definitely. And especially good for you with learn, like, researching, doing your research. I mean, that's important. That will stick to certain people. I mean, because you'll get the same questions here and there, but someone who does a really good research, again, like I said, we talked earlier about, interviews and stuff. Like I said, I was kind of, flat-footed. I didn't really say much. I was kind of just like monotone. But once you kind of start loosen up, and you can actually see, like, there's certain people that when you're talking to them and they get comfortable, their shoulders kind of laid, like they start opening up more. Like TD was kind of like that at first too. He was, not that he was stiff, but you could tell like he was giving me a little bit, but as as the interview continued, you saw him getting a little bit more comfortable and opening up more, talking more. So it's easy to see that,
I love it.
But again, Mrs. Anderson, thank you so much for coming on. I do appreciate. I mean, it's been a blast. I love your work, and I'm very happy for you. You're working for the Titans, not playing for the Titans, but
Oh, I wish. If I were gonna play for the Titans, I'd be in that DB room.
Oh, you would?
I'm a DB all the way. I'm one of those chip on the shoulders.
Okay.
Maybe talk a little trash every now and then, but I got swag, a little style. Like DBs all the way. That's like my favorite position.
Okay. All
yeah.
Right. Well, again, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I love the conversation, and thank you so much for everything. All right.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Have a good one.